I'm Samuel Meyers. I'm the Ward Wilkins Chair of Human Relations, Social Justice at the Human H. Humphrey School of Public Affairs, University of Minnesota. So, I didn't start, doing research on racial disparities. My first papers focused on the bias associated with estimating the Becker matter uh, by using offense data. And the offense data is reported data. And I developed, for at least at the time, a novel methodology for using uniform crime reports and the crime victimization reports in order to compute a estimated true crime rates, which is related to the reported crime rates and the underreporting rate. And so you can adjust the reported rates if you can estimate the underreporting rate, from another data set. Well, the Uniform Crime Report's offense data isn't based on race. It's only a rush data that's based on race. And there are two reasons why I wasn't initially looking at racial differences in offenses. One is that nobody else really cared about race when I began doing my work on estimating the deterrent effects of crime. The second is the fact that I did receive a little bit of caution uh, from advisors, and that is to stay away from race initially until I got tenure. So another big paper that I worked on was a paper on the rehabilitation effect of punishment. It turns out that my underlying theory was based on experience and knowledge of classmates who had gone to prison. And I went to college, and some of my classmates went to prison. And the ones who went to prison got a degree in prison. I went to college, I got a degree in economics. And I kind of labeled this criminal human capital. And this was a paper that was published in Economic Inquiry. So I challenged the notion that there's a one direction effect of imprisonment, either by way of a deterrent effect, which is what the economists were talking about, or incarceration effect, which people like Al Bloomstein, the criminologists, were talking about. And so I talked about the rehabilitative effect of punishment, and argued that there are actually two components. One component that reduces the expected returns in the future of engaging in illegal activity. So that's kind of like an enhanced deterrent effect. But the second is the criminal human capital effect. And so it becomes an empirical question, and that's one of my first papers. So how did I get involved in race? Well, there are actually two things going on. One was the fact that I, the reason why I wrote my dissertation on economics of crime was that I grew up in a neighborhood where I went to middle school where the smartest people in my class were crooks. They were just brilliant. I mean, they really, really were very smart. They were exceptional in analytical reasoning and in mathematics. It's just that what they were doing was illegal. So it was basically, numbers games, and some people were involved in heroin trade, but they were not heroin users. They actually, in fact, the biggest numbers runner that I know did not. That he didn't gamble. He basically was he was a salesman. I mean, he was someone who made a lot of money with other people losing. But the point is that the initial interest in economics of crime was related to my knowledge and interaction with people who were criminals because what they were doing was criminal, as opposed to criminals because they were born criminal, or criminals because they had some sort of defect or whatever. In fact, I argue in one of my papers that was published in the review of Black Political Economy, argued that if these people had been engaged in activities at Harvard Business School, then they would be, exceptional businessmen. It's just that the thing they were doing happened to be, illegal. Well, anyway, I did have a project with the Vera Institute of Justice, and they had a very detailed data set that included information on the race and the education, the age, the gender of individuals receiving bail in the in New York court system, and I estimated amount of the economics of bail jumping, predicting whether or not people jump bail. That turns out that there were big differences in the probability of jumping bail, as well as the probability of receiving bail between blacks and whites. But the editor of the journal, this was the Journal of Legal Studies at the University of Chicago, really liked the paper, partly because the editor had written on this topic, but argued that he didn't like the race part. So if he dropped the race part, then they would publish the paper. And so I was an assistant professor at the time, and this was a revise and resubmit, and he said take the race out, and so I took the race out and got the paper published. And then I got tenure, but then after I got tenure, I said, I've been denying race as existing for such a long time. Now I need to go back to my roots, and that's when Sandy and I began to work together on models of welfare and family structure. And I suggested to Sandy that we estimate the underlying structural equation for the supply of marriageable mates, including something that William Julius Wilson hadn't included, and that's including an incarceration failure. So about that time, incarceration rates were going up among black males, and about that time, marriage rates among females were going down, and so we hypothesized that a man who's incarcerated is not as attractive as a marriageable mate, and a man who's in. So we were looking at two time periods: the time period where incarceration rates were low, and the time period where incarceration rates were higher, and hypothesized that the change in the family structure could be causally related to differences in incarceration rates. So my work on race really was partly motivated by my need to get back to my roots. I really was interested and was committed to using economics in order to examine racial inequalities. It's just that when I was in graduate school and when I was an assistant professor, there was kind of a mainstream concern about writing on race because of the differences in the likelihood that papers would get published. And then I had personal experience of dealing with an editor who specifically told me to take race out of the analysis. I shared this story with my father, who got his PhD in economics in 1949 from Harvard University. And I told him that, why is it that people telling me don't write on race? And he said, his dissertation advisor, who was John Kenneth Galbraith, told him exactly the same thing, not to write on race. And I don't know, maybe some sense, at least, during the mid to the end of the 20th century, where the view was you can't get tenure in the economics department, if you're working on race. So let me just say that it's been a long journey, from the time when I started in this profession and where I'm in now, where I think that looking at racial inequality is far more acceptable, type of body of research.